Hey y'all, it's the Jed. I hope you're having a great weekend. To quote Monty Python, now for something completely different. As the title suggests, I've been living a double life and I'm here to confess it. Most of the content on this channel is of course BMW content. My main ride is a 2019 R1250GS. But about a year ago, right really in the heart of the pandemic, I bought a 1991 Harley Davidson FXLR, and I did one video with that I'll put a link to. The bike was mostly stock, and initially my intent was to leave it that way. It had about 35,000 miles on it, and it was a really beautiful bike. I was going to do some mild upgrading and clean up the engine a bit. But when we dug into it, we found a crack in one of the threads in the cases of the engine that was going to require opening the cases to fix. And when that became a reality, I thought to myself, no, I'm gonna replace the engine. I had taken the bike to Eric Bennett in Signal Hill. His shop is called Bennett's Performance. I'd heard great things about him, and I met him and I really liked him, and I trusted him mostly. And so initially I thought we would try to source an S&S V111, which is an Evo engine. But talking to Eric made me realize, with Eric as an engine builder, I'd be better off going with a twin cam swap in the bike. What Eric did, unlike I think a lot of twin cam swaps, is he maintained the stock transmission case, which meant that unlike a lot of twin cam swaps into FXRs, we didn't have to cut the frame at all. What it required using was an adapter plate between the twin cam S&S engine and the stock Evo transmission case. The engine that he built is a 106 stroker. I'll put up the bore and stroke specs on screen. When we got all finished and he dynoed the bike, we ended up just over 100 horsepower and a torque curve that topped out at around 110 pound-feet of torque, really all the way across the torque curve. So it's a really snappy and powerful engine. It feels great off the line for riding around town, and it's a 5-speed, so it revs pretty high at highway speeds, but it is a blast to ride. Now, if you're watching this and you are a BMW rider, I'd ask you to just resist the natural tendency to say, why would you get a Harley Davidson? They don't handle, they don't turn, they don't rev, they're heavy. But this bike is different. I'm gonna do a walk around now, and we'll talk a bit about how this bike is built. What it boils down to for me, in terms of why this FXR, I love it. I love Harley Davidson. I'm an American. I love riding an American motorcycle. Not that there's anything wrong with Japanese or German bikes, and obviously I ride both, and I have both in my garage. But there's something about being an American, riding an American motorcycle, particularly here in California, that is satisfying. So there it is. As I mentioned, it started off as a relatively stock 1991 FXLR, also known as a lowrider custom, which meant it had a 21-inch front wheel, it had a black and chrome engine, and it had this tank unique to the FXLRs. It's a little smaller, I think, than a FXRS tank. There are no gauges. There's no center console, for lack of a better word. It had a black leather strap, and as you can see, I had that replaced, and a guy named Dwayne Ballard made me this pretty cool tank strap. Paint has remained stock on this, mostly anyway. That's the stock paint on the tank, on the side panels, and on the rear fender. But I had to replace the front fender when I replaced the 21-inch wheel with everything we did up front. So let me just start with the power plant, and then we'll go front to back. There is that S&S twin cam engine. This one is a 106 stroker running a Mikuni 45 carb with an Arlen Ness Big Sucker air cleaner. I don't know if you can read it on there, but there's Eric's logo, Bennett's Performance in Long Beach. I decided, unlike a lot of folks I think, to run a Super Trap 2-into-1 pipe, and you can see there are those Super Trap iconic discs. When we tuned this, we ended up with I think 22 discs in it. I do like the way these pipes sound. They idle a little quieter than a lot of pipes these days, but they are of course tunable, and we ended up with a beautiful torque curve, and I'm really happy with the way these pipes perform. Starting up front now, I've gone to a 19-inch rim up front. This is a stock Dyna rim, and I'm running Michelin Commander 3 tires. The whole front end is basically a Kraus front end. It's Kraus triple trees with Olin's inverted forks that they sell for these triple trees, and I'm running dual Brembo radial mounted calipers in the front. Great stopping power, huge improvement in handling. I've got a OEM Harley Davidson quarter fairing that is quick detachable, and it's painted to color match with the gold pinstriping too, and that's a Moon's MC LED headlight. I'm running 96 and up hand controls, stock Harley mirrors, and I've got a digital gauge. I'll put a Chiron of the brand name because I've already forgotten it, truthfully, but it's great. It gives me a tack and a digital speedo and a bunch of other data as well. Saddleman step-up seat, which is super comfortable. I just went with a pretty plain tuck and roll seat. I don't like a lot of color or wild stitching on my seat because I think it just detracts from the bike. By the way, I didn't mention it, but there's that stock FXR transmission. It's a 5-speed, and we powder coated in flat and also glossy black most of the engine and transmission cases, also the foot controls. In the rear here, that's a C&S aluminum swing arm, again with Olin shocks, and there's that Dyna rim. That's a 17 in the rear, and a Brembo radial mounted caliper in the rear. Mounted a 160 tire in the back. If I were doing it again, I think I would not try to go that wide. It handles nicely, but I don't like the look of it as much as a narrower tire. So I think when I replace this, I'll go down to a 150 or maybe even a 140. And I maintained a belt drive. A lot of folks switch out to a chain drive on these, but I really like the reliability and low maintenance of a belt drive. We did have to go to a narrower pulley and belt in order to fit it in with this Dyna rim inside of this CNS swing arm, but it all worked out. There's the ugly side. Single fire ignition. Running a oil cooler on here because the twin cam tends to get pretty hot. There's another view from the front. So let me start this thing up and we'll take it for a little ride. You can get a look at the Speedo there. Idle's nice and quiet. It's taken me a while to get confident with these brakes because of course they're not anti-lock brakes, and I've been riding anti-lock brakes and traction control for so long that I've gotten to be a shitty rider, and I'm having to get confident without those granny monitors. But it's been fun relearning what it feels like to ride a simpler bike. I'm really happy with the way this Öhlins suspension handles. I've got it set up pretty stiff, but it tracks really nicely. It is by no means a high performance motorcycle. It doesn't handle nearly as well as my GS does, but I'm not looking for it to. I'm just looking for it to be the best bike it can be, and in that connection I'm really happy with the choices I made. And in comparing it to the GS, I'm really doing it a disservice. It is a nice performing bike in its own right. It doesn't have nearly the suspension travel that bike has, and it's a little heavier, but it's a hot ride. It's a high performance hot ride. And it makes me feel young again. And there's a great community of FXR guys out there online. I didn't make it to the FXR Jam this year, but I've already got tickets for the West Coast Jam for next year. I did meet a bunch of guys at Born Free this year. The Born Free show, there was on the first day there was a FXR corral, and we all parked in there, and I got to meet a lot of the guys who I only knew from online, and it's a great group. I'm gonna meet Kenny a little later today, so I think I'll go down and get some gas. Alright, as it turns out, Kenny just texted me and we're going to go pick him up. So, let's go get him. How'd he do?